You're in the elevator of the building where you've worked for 5 years. The same walls, the same metallic noise, the same people. But today something feels different. You feel like you've become invisible. Not because people don't see you, but because you've realized they never really looked at you in the first place. They talk to you, smile politely, ask about your weekend, but there's a strange emptiness in all of it. Like you're just a functional piece in a giant machine, useful while it works, disposable when it stops. You don't need to be hated to be slowly destroyed. Sometimes polite indifference is far more devastating than declared hostility. Because you can defend yourself against hatred, but against systematic indifference you just disappear. Franz Kafka lived this reality viscerally. In his words, he described a truth that still corrodes millions of people today. I am like a cage in search of a bird. This disturbing image reveals something profound about the nature of modern destruction. We're not attacked directly. We're emptied out, transformed into hollow structures that once housed something alive, but now exist only as empty containers, waiting for a purpose that never comes. Today's destruction doesn't come with screams or violence. It comes dressed as normalcy, as routine, as silent expectations that consume us from the inside out. Think about Maria, a 42-year-old woman who works at an accounting firm. She's competent, punctual, never causes problems. Her coworkers greet her every day. Her boss praises her work when necessary. Her family treats her with basic affection. But Maria feels like she's dying slowly. Not because someone hates or mistreats her. On the contrary, everyone is kind. The problem is precisely that. The superficial kindness that never deepens. The functionality that never transforms into humanity. The presence that never becomes meaning. Maria discovered that you can be surrounded by people and still be completely ignored in your essence. She realized that modern society has created a sophisticated form of destruction, keeping you functioning while emptying you from within. Kafka's genius was in perceiving that the modern nightmare wouldn't be made of obvious monsters, but of invisible bureaucracies. Systems that work perfectly well without you actually existing as a person. You become a number, a function, a social role, and the most terrible thing is that this transformation happens gradually, almost imperceptibly. One day you're alive, full of dreams and personality. The next day you're still there, but something fundamental has died, and no one needed to hate you for this to happen. In fact, everyone was very polite throughout the entire process. The Kafkaesque world isn't a place of evil villains. It's a place of well-intentioned people who participate in a system that destroys the human soul without anyone noticing or taking responsibility. It's the teacher who reduces you to a grade, the doctor who treats you as a set of symptoms, the boss who sees you only as productivity, the family that loves you but never really knows you. Each of them is a good person, doing their job, fulfilling their role. But together they create a reality where you can be completely destroyed by systematic kindness. This silent destruction has very specific characteristics. It doesn't attack you, it ignores you. It doesn't criticize you, it standardizes you. It doesn't reject you, it accepts you superficially. And perhaps this is the cruelest form of violence. Being reduced to such a simplified version of yourself that you eventually forget who you really are beneath all the expectations and functions. You become efficient at being who others need you to be, but completely lose touch with who you actually are. And this happens so gradually that when you finally realize it, it seems too late to go back. Modern society has created what we could call violence by omission. You're not attacked, you're neglected. Your complexity is ignored. Your depth is reduced to functional characteristics. Your dreams are treated as irrelevant if they don't fit expected productive molds. And the most perverse thing is that this is done with a polite smile. No one is openly cruel to you. Everyone is professional, correct, appropriate. But in this process of appropriateness, something essential in you slowly dies. Kafka understood that the fault wasn't with people individually, but with the system that forced them to relate in superficial and functional ways. Each person was so busy fulfilling their role, following their instructions, meeting their demands, that there was no space left to see the real human being behind the social function. And so, good people participated in the destruction of other good people, without malice, without cruel intention, but with devastating efficiency. Think about John, a 28-year-old man who was always creative and a dreamer. He worked at an advertising agency where everyone praised his technical ability. But John felt his creativity was being slowly crushed by standardized briefs, bureaucratic approvals, commercial needs that had nothing to do with his artistic vision. His colleagues were nice people, his boss was fair, the environment was professional, but John realized he was becoming a competent technician instead of an authentic creator. No one forced him to do this. No one threatened him. Simply, the system worked in such a way that his authenticity was irrelevant. He was valued for his ability to produce what was expected, not for his ability to create something genuine. Modern destruction is subtle because it doesn't break you all at once. It convinces you to break yourself. It offers you rewards for giving up parts of yourself. A better salary if you accept working on something that doesn't motivate you. Social approval if you behave according to expectations that don't make sense to you. Security if you give up taking risks that could lead you to a more authentic life. And so, you gradually negotiate pieces of your soul in exchange for practical benefits. And no one forces you to do this. You choose. But your choices happen within a system that makes authentic alternatives practically impossible. Pause here for a moment. Have you ever felt like you're living a life that isn't really yours? Like you're playing a character that someone else wrote for you, but that has nothing to do with who you really are inside? That feeling of always being slightly displaced from your own existence? I know you recognize this feeling because it's almost universal in our society. If you've ever felt this way, like you're living on autopilot while your true personality withers somewhere inaccessible, write in the comments, "I want to be myself again." Just that. Because when you admit this, you're taking the first step to break the invisible cage they've built around your authenticity. What Kafka perceived, and what continues to be true today, is that the most effective destruction doesn't need hatred. It just needs organized indifference. A world where everyone does their job, fulfills their roles, follows the rules, but no one really cares about the person you are underneath all of this. A world where you can scream for help and receive polite answers that don't help at all. Where you can ask to be seen and be observed but not really perceived. This form of destruction is particularly cruel because it leaves you without a clear target for your anger. Who are you going to rebel against? Against people who are polite to you? Against systems that work exactly as they should work? Against a society that gives you opportunities and treats you with formal respect? You can't revolt against well-dressed indifference. You can't fight against superficial kindness. And so you internalize the feeling that the problem must be you. After all, everyone is correct with you. If you're feeling empty, it must be a personal flaw. But the truth that Kafka intuited is that this feeling of emptiness isn't a personal flaw. It's a natural symptom of living in a world that values your functionality but ignores your humanity. It's the inevitable result of being treated as a resource instead of as a person. It's the consequence of living in relationships that are correct but not true, in jobs that are stable but not meaningful, in interactions that are polite but not genuine. Kafka's genius was in showing that the absurdity of modern existence isn't in the obviously wrong things, but in the things that are too right. Systems that work perfectly for everyone except you. Rules that make sense to everyone except when applied to your specific situation. People who are reasonable in everything except really understanding you. The Kafkaesque nightmare isn't chaotic. It's organized, logical, efficient. And precisely because of this, you have no way to escape it by complaining that things don't work. Things work. The problem is that they work in a way that makes you irrelevant as a human being. Consider the story of Anne, a 35-year-old teacher who loves educating children. She works at a school where everyone is a competent professional, where the norms are clear, where everything works according to plan. But Anne feels dead inside because the educational system reduces her passion for teaching to a series of protocols that must be followed. She can't truly connect with her students because there are rules about appropriate distance. She can't teach according to her pedagogical intuition because there's a curriculum that must be completed. She can't be creative because there are standardized assessments that determine success. And so Anne becomes a competent executor of an educational system, but ceases to be an authentic educator. And no one forced her to do this. The system simply made authenticity impractical. What makes this situation particularly painful is that you can't complain without seeming ungrateful. After all, you have a job, people are polite to you, you have security, you're included in society. How can you complain about being well treated? How can you explain that slowly dying from kindness is much worse than being openly attacked? How can you say that you'd rather be hated for who you really are than be accepted for a false version of yourself? Kafka understood this specific pain because he lived it intensely. He knew what it's like to feel that you're always on the wrong side of a conversation that makes sense to everyone else. How it feels to be certain that there's a deep humanity in you, but be unable to express it in a way that's recognized by the world around you. How it feels to constantly translate your true personality into a language that others can understand. And in this translation process, something essential is always lost. Silent destruction works through what we could call death by 1,000 courtesies. Each superficial interaction is a small cut to your authenticity. Each standardized conversation is a small denial of your complexity. Each time you're reduced to a social label is a small death of your individuality. And these small cuts accumulate until one day you realize that almost nothing remains of what you used to be. And the cruelest part is that each cut was made with the best of intentions, by people who probably didn't even notice what they were doing. The modern world has created a sophisticated way for us to emotionally cannibalize each other. We consume people's vital energy around us without even realizing it, transforming them into useful functions for our own needs. The salesperson exists to sell us things. The teacher exists to educate our children. The doctor exists to solve our health problems. The bus driver exists to take us where we want to go. And in this process, we completely forget that behind each function exists a complex person, with fears, dreams, pains, and joys that have nothing to do with the utility they have for us. This reduction of people to social functions is so naturalized that we don't even notice when we're victims of it. When someone asks you, "What do you do?" instead of "Who are you?" they're unconsciously reducing you to your social utility. When someone judges you by your job, your appearance, your social status, they're ignoring the real person that exists beneath these superficial categories. And when this happens repeatedly, you start to see yourself through these reductionist lenses. You start to believe that you really are only what you do, only what you possess, only what you represent socially. The great tragedy is that people who participate in this silent destruction are rarely bad people. They are, most of the time, busy people, worried about their own problems, trying to survive in a system that is also slowly destroying them. They reduce you to a function not out of malice, but out of hurry. They ignore you as a person not out of cruelty, but because they're overwhelmed with their own demands. And so, we all participate in a cycle where we destroy each other through mutual negligence, each one too busy with their own survival to really see the humanity of others. Kafka intuited that this dynamic would create a world where people would feel profoundly alone, even while constantly surrounded by other people. A world where you could talk to dozens of people per day and still not have a single truly human conversation. A world where you could be socially successful and still feel like a complete stranger in your own life. And this is exactly the world we've built. What's most impressive about the Kafkaesque vision is how it predicted that modern loneliness wouldn't be caused by physical isolation, but by emotional isolation in the midst of crowds. You're always accompanied but rarely understood, always included but rarely truly belonging, always functional but rarely valued for who you really are. And this loneliness disguised as sociability is much more devastating than honest loneliness, because it leaves you confused about what exactly is wrong. Modern medicine has names for the symptoms of this silent destruction: anxiety, depression, panic disorder, mood disorders. But we rarely connect these symptoms to the root cause, living in a society that systematically ignores our essential humanity. We treat the symptoms individually, as if they were isolated personal problems, without realizing that they're natural responses to an environment that is emotionally toxic to the human soul. When you constantly live having to suppress who you really are to fit external expectations, your nervous system eventually collapses. When you're forced to constantly translate your authenticity into socially acceptable language, you develop chronic anxiety. When you feel that you can never really be yourself in any situation, you develop depression. These aren't personal defects. They're signs that you're trying to live a life that is fundamentally incompatible with your essential nature. The cruel irony is that we often seek help for these problems from the same system that's causing them. We go to therapists who help us adapt better to circumstances that are making us sick. We take medications that help us tolerate intolerable situations. We learn stress management techniques to deal better with chronically stressful environments. And so, instead of questioning why our society is producing so many emotionally wounded people, we focus on finding ways to function better within this sick society. Kafka understood that true rebellion against this system wouldn't be violent or dramatic. It would be simply the refusal to disappear. The insistence on remaining human in a world that constantly pressures you to become functional. The courage to be authentic even when it's inconvenient for others. The determination to maintain contact with your own essence, even when everyone around seems to have lost theirs. This Kafkaesque rebellion isn't easy, because it requires you to develop a way of being in the world that is radically different from the norm. You have to learn to validate your own internal experience when the external world constantly invalidates it. You have to find ways to express your authenticity that don't depend on others' approval. You have to cultivate relationships based on genuine mutual recognition instead of functional convenience. And perhaps the hardest part is that you have to do this while still participating in a society that operates according to the rules that are destroying you. You can't simply exit the system completely. You need to work, pay bills, fulfill social obligations. But you can learn to do these things without completely losing touch with yourself. You can participate in the social game without forgetting that it's just a game, and that who you really are exists independently of how well you play. The greatest discovery you can make on the journey back to authenticity is realizing that you don't need anyone's permission to be who you really are. Society may not value your true nature, but that doesn't mean it's less valuable. Others may not understand your unique way of seeing the world, but that doesn't mean your perspective is wrong. The system may not have space for your authenticity, but that doesn't mean you need to give it up. Start by paying attention to moments when you feel like you're playing a role instead of being yourself. Notice when you modify your way of speaking, acting, thinking to fit other people's expectations. Observe when you feel that subtle sensation of betraying yourself in the name of social acceptance. These moments of awareness are the beginning of Kafkaesque liberation. The next step is to start making small experiments with authenticity. Share a real opinion even when you're not sure it will be well received. Express a genuine feeling even when it seems inappropriate for the situation. Refuse to participate in superficial conversations when you really need deep connection. Each small act of authenticity is an act of resistance against the system that wants to transform you into a function. And finally, start cultivating relationships with people who see and value you for who you really are, not just for what you can do for them. This might mean distancing yourself from people who only relate to the functional version of you. It might mean seeking communities where your complexity is valued instead of simplified. It might mean choosing relationships based on genuine mutual recognition instead of social convenience. Do you know that feeling of always being slightly out of tune with the world around you? Like everyone received a life instruction manual that you never got? Like you're always one step behind in a dance that everyone knows except you? If you recognize this feeling, if you've ever felt like a foreigner in your own life, write in the comments, "I didn't get the manual." These simple words create a bridge between people who share this unique experience of not fitting completely into the expected mold. And maybe, by admitting this together, we can find ways to create our own manuals, based on who we really are, instead of who we should be. Kafkaesque liberation isn't about finding a perfect place where you'll be completely understood and valued. It's about learning to maintain contact with your own essential humanity regardless of the environment you find yourself in. It's about developing a way of being in the world that honors both your practical needs and your emotional integrity. It's about finding the balance between participating in society and preserving your soul. Franz Kafka left us a precious legacy. The understanding that our sense of alienation and inadequacy is often not a personal defect, but a healthy response to a sick environment. When you feel like a stranger in a world that values conformity above authenticity, you're responding appropriately. When you feel that something essential is dying inside you in the name of social adequacy, you're perceiving something real and important. Authentic life in a Kafkaesque world isn't about completely escaping the system, but about learning to navigate it without losing your soul in the process. It's about finding ways to be true to yourself, even when it's inconvenient for others. It's about creating spaces of genuine humanity in the midst of a world that privileges functionality. It's about remembering that, beneath all the social roles you perform, there exists a real and valuable person who deserves to be seen, understood, and valued. One of the greatest revelations of this journey is discovering that the feeling of not completely belonging anywhere can, in fact, be a sign of sanity in an insane world. When you feel that you don't fit perfectly into any group, any social category, any predefined label, this might mean that you're maintaining contact with a part of yourself that is broader and more complex than any external definition. Kafkaesque inadaptation isn't necessarily a problem to be solved. It can be a characteristic to be valued. This doesn't mean isolating yourself completely or becoming antisocial. It means developing the ability to participate in social groups while maintaining a part of yourself that remains independent and autonomous. It means learning to give what you can give without completely emptying yourself. It means finding ways to receive what you need without becoming dependent on external validation. It's a delicate balance, but it's possible. An important strategy in this journey is learning to distinguish between solitude and loneliness. Loneliness is the pain of being disconnected. Solitude is the pleasure of being connected to yourself. When you learn to value moments of genuine solitude, you develop an internal refuge that no one can take away from you. You create a sacred space within yourself where your authenticity can exist without external interference. And from this stable internal space, you can relate to the world in a more balanced way. Kafka understood that authentic creativity emerges precisely from this tension between belonging and not belonging. When you're slightly out of tune with the world around you, you develop a unique perspective that can see things that completely adapted people can't see. Your inadaptation becomes a source of insight. Your strangeness becomes a form of wisdom. Your difference becomes a gift to the world. But for this to happen, you need to stop seeing your singularity as a defect to be corrected and start seeing it as a resource to be cultivated. You need to stop trying to become normal and start exploring ways to be extraordinary in a way that is genuinely yours. You need to stop apologizing for being different and start celebrating what your difference can contribute to the world. This requires a fundamental change in how you relate to external approval. Instead of seeking universal approval, you learn to seek genuine recognition from people who really see and value you. Instead of trying to please everyone, you learn to build deep relationships with people who accept you completely. Instead of modifying yourself to fit into any group, you learn to find or create communities where your authenticity is welcome. The Kafkaesque transformation doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process of awakening to your own humanity in a world that constantly pressures you to be less human and more functional. It's a process of recovering parts of yourself that you may have abandoned or hidden to survive socially. It's a process of integrating who you really are with who you need to be to live in the world. And perhaps the most liberating discovery is realizing that you don't have to choose between being authentic and being successful. You can find ways to be true to yourself that are also practical and sustainable. You can develop a presence in the world that honors both your internal needs and your external responsibilities. You can learn to play the necessary social games without losing sight of the fact that they're just games. The key is developing what we could call authentic flexibility, the ability to adapt to different situations and contexts without losing the essential core of who you are. Like an actor who can play different characters but never forgets their own identity. Like a musician who can play different styles but maintains their unique signature. Like a tree that can bend with the wind but keeps its roots firm in the ground. This authentic flexibility allows you to navigate the Kafkaesque world without getting lost in it. It allows you to participate in society without being consumed by it. It allows you to relate to other people without losing contact with yourself. And gradually, as you develop this ability, you might even start influencing the environments around you, creating more human and authentic spaces wherever you go. Remember that each person who chooses to maintain contact with their essential authenticity is contributing to the collective healing of a society that has forgotten how to honor individual humanity. Each time you refuse to disappear into a social function, you're reminding other people that they also have the right to exist as complete human beings. Each time you choose depth instead of superficiality, you're creating permission for others to make the same choice. Kafkaesque liberation isn't just a personal project, it's also an act of service to the world. When you become more authentically human, you help humanize the environments where you live. When you refuse to participate in systems that dehumanize, you're helping to create more human alternatives. When you insist on being treated as a complete person, you're establishing a standard that benefits everyone around you. And so, what began as a journey of personal survival transforms into a contribution to collective evolution. What began as an attempt not to be silently destroyed transforms into a force of creation and renewal. What began as an escape from dehumanization transforms into a movement toward a fuller and truer humanity. If you've made it this far, it's because you recognize that there's something deeper and truer waiting to be lived. You're not alone in the feeling that life can be more authentic, more connected, more meaningful than the standardized versions we're offered. This channel exists for people like you, who feel that life's most important questions deserve to be explored with courage and honesty. Subscribe to become part of a community that understands that your search for authenticity isn't a luxury, but an existential necessity. Together, we'll explore ways of living that honor both our need to belong and our need to be true to ourselves. Because you deserve a life that is genuinely yours, even if it's different from everything you've seen before.